SpaceX has scheduled a full week of testing for Starship and Super Heavy, with up to 30 hours of road and beach closures, and is working hard to prepare the first orbital-class ship and launcher for numerous key obstacles. In this video, we are going to talk about the updates on Starship Super Heavy static fire and cryogenic testing. But before that, we welcome you all to our channel. Thank you all for your love and support. If you are new here, make sure to subscribe to never miss a single update from the world of space. SpaceX has recently finished a test flight of the rocket mission on a 3-day tour around the Earth. On Monday, September 13th, the spaceflight company completed a static fire test of its Falcon 9 rocket at NASA's Kennedy Space Center, Pad 39A. The test is one of the final significant benchmarks before the scheduled launch on Wednesday, September 15th. As preparations continue, launch workers are also keeping an eye on the weather, which now has an 80% chance of supporting the flight. The test was conducted and scheduled in the early morning hours of Monday, only 2 days before the mission's scheduled launch date. As the rocket's 9 Merlin 1 engines ignited, smoke and fire billowed briefly. A static fire test, or brief ignition, is a regular part of pre-launch procedures and one of the final significant milestones before liftoff. The Falcon 9 is held down on the pad during the test while its 9 first-stage engines are briefly activated. This enables crew to confirm that all systems are operational and that the rocket is ready to launch. SpaceX tweeted shortly after the test that the static fire test was successful and that the company expected to launch sometime during a 5-hour window that opened on September 15th, 8:02 p.m. EDT. The first stage of the rocket is expected to land on a SpaceX drone ship, and after a successful launch, the crew capsule will spend 3 days orbiting Earth on a trajectory that would take it higher than the ISS's altitude. Both the Dragon spacecraft and its rocket have previously launched, as is typical of SpaceX. The Crew Dragon capsule used for this trip is the same one that sent the Crew 1 astronauts to orbit in November 2020, called Resilience. The first stage booster will be on its 3rd mission, having previously carried 2 updated GPS satellites into space for the United States Space Force. Teams were up very early Monday morning to load the rocket with super-chilled propellants, kerosene and liquid oxygen, as well as briefly ignite the first stage 9 Merlin 1D engines. At 2:30 a.m. EDT, the engines briefly burned, delivering 1.7 million pounds of thrust as the booster stayed securely on the ground. Engineers evaluated the data before concluding that the Falcon 9's planned launch attempt on Wednesday evening will go ahead. Falcon 9 static fire test completed targeting Wednesday, September 15th, for launch of Dragon's first all-civilian human spaceflight, SpaceX tweeted shortly after the test. The static fire test follows a complete dress rehearsal that took place on Sunday evening. The crew grabbed their spacesuits and rode to the launch pad in SpaceX's fleet for the dress rehearsal. Following that, the crew practiced launch day procedures one last time before liftoff. The mission will have a 5-hour launch window that begins at 8:02 p.m. EDT on September 15th. Throughout that window, the crew will have multiple chances to launch. The mission's first stage booster will be landed on a floating platform at sea. If successful, it will be SpaceX's 90-second booster recovery. Doug, one of the company's newest ships, has been dispatched to assist the veteran just read the instructions. Aside from the booster-catching drone ships, the firm has deployed a fleet of Dragon rescue vessels around Florida in case of a liftoff abort. Splashdown is expected 3 days after launch, with Dragon having several potential landing zones to choose from, with the corporation making a final decision closer to landing based on weather and sea state predictions. Despite the lack of launches, SpaceX Starbase is a hive of activity, with preparations underway for both Booster 4 and Ship 20's impending orbital test flight, and the anticipated increase of launch cadence with follow-on vehicles. The orbital launch site has gotten a lot of attention recently, especially the tank farm and the Mechazilla upgrades to the launch tower. Ship 20, on the other hand, is keeping the suborbital pad busy with a first round of testing, which began with a proof test on Monday night. SpaceX is presently working toward a November deadline for the orbital test flight, which is still subject to paperwork approval. The FAA recently released a draft programmatic environmental assessment for public comment ahead of its historic first push to orbit for the world's most powerful rocket, highlighting the requirements that must be approved for the historic first push to orbit for Booster 4 and Ship 20. SpaceX should meet a number of flight vehicle and launch infrastructure milestones, regardless of how the FAA approves it. During the preparations for proof testing aboard Ship 20, many thermal protection systems, tiles, were replaced. Ship 20 was initially filled with gaseous nitrogen for the pneumatic test, formerly known as the ambient test, before being loaded with super cold liquid nitrogen for the cryogenic test, which began on Monday evening. Although it is uncertain whether all the proof testing objectives were achieved, an important lesson was learnt when some of the TPS tiles popped off the vehicle during the testing phase. Header tank venting, according to Elon Musk, resulted in the minor escape of tiles. Other goals of the proof test include generating loads on the thrust, with thrust rams, which are hydraulic rods. Once this device is removed, a clue for the next phase of testing will be recorded, allowing Ship 20 to prepare for static fire testing. Ship 20 is planned to fire up its 3 sea-level Raptors first, followed by undetermined testing with the 3 RVACs, which are loaded with liquid oxygen and liquid methane. However, only one RVAC has been fired at a time, with all of the testing taking place at SpaceX's McGregor facility rather than Starbase. While Ship 20 moves through its test objectives at the suborbital pad, Booster 4, next door at the orbital launch site, will follow a similar path with proof testing objectives, before what is likely to be a series of static fire tests. The OLS tank farm, which has been building up its set of commodity tanks over the previous few months, will be used to enhance Booster 4's experiments. All that is left for GSE-8 to roll out, followed by transportation of the remaining cryo shells that are used to insulate the tanks. Smaller tanks were also seen traveling down Highway 4 on Saturday, illustrating why SpaceX would test Ship 20 first, ahead of the OLS tank farm's readiness. While work on the launch tower continued, Booster 4 spent a few weeks completing preparations on the OLS site mount. Installation of the quick disconnect extension, which will be used to provide propellant to the Starship when mated atop Super Heavy, was part of that task. However, once SpaceX completes the initial test flights, a large number of ships and boosters will be stacked, necessitating more high bay space. To accommodate this, SpaceX is already constructing a larger, more expansive site to the north of the current high bay. For the past 2 weeks, foundation construction has been underway, with the new bay's walls set to emerge from the Earth next month. One thing is certain, the rate at which this development is happening, and the fact that we can observe it all, is fairly amazing. With this, we have reached the end of our video. If you love this video, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more updates from the world of space. Your support really means a lot to us. Thank you so much for watching. See you again tomorrow for more updates. Stay tuned.